Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. The party was supposed to start at 9. Tyler had been bugging me about it all week. His cousin's girlfriend was turning 21, and apparently her parents owned this swanky rooftop venue downtown. I wasn't really in the mood for a party that Saturday night in October. Northwestern was kicking my ass with midterms, and honestly, I just wanted to stay in my dorm and binge some Netflix. But Tyler kept insisting it would be worth it. Free drinks, he said. Amazing views of the Chicago skyline. Girls from DePaul and Loyola. The whole college crowd would be there. I finally caved around 8:30, threw on the only clean button-down I had, and caught the purple line down to the loop. The building was one of those converted warehouses near River North, all exposed brick and industrial chic. 23 floors up, Tyler had texted me. Take the freight elevator in the back. The main one's broken. I remember thinking it was weird that the lobby was completely empty. No doorman, no security, just this flickering fluorescent light and the sound of my footsteps echoing off marble floors. The freight elevator smelled like rust and old grease. It groaned the entire way up, stopping at every floor even though I hadn't pressed any buttons. By the time I reached the rooftop access door, it was already 9:47. I could hear the city noise filtering through. Sirens, traffic, the usual Chicago soundtrack. But no music, no voices, no party sounds at all. The rooftop door was heavy, one of those fire-rated steel ones that takes real effort to push open. When I finally got through, the October wind hit me like a slap. The space was incredible. String lights crisscrossing overhead, those fancy propane heaters that look like metal mushrooms, a full bar setup with bottles still gleaming under the lights. Tables were set with half-eaten appetizers, champagne flutes with lipstick marks, purses and jackets draped over chairs. A 3-tier birthday cake sat untouched on the main table. Happy 21st Melissa, written in pink frosting. But the place was completely deserted. Not a single person, just the wind whipping through abandoned decorations, making the string lights dance like they were trying to spell out a warning. I pulled out my phone to text Tyler. Maybe I'd gotten the wrong rooftop, wrong building even. No response. I tried calling, straight to voicemail. That's when I noticed the shoes. 3 pairs lined up neat as you please by the western edge of the roof. Women's heels, expensive looking, a pair of men's dress shoes, and weirdest of all, a single pink Converse sneaker, the kind with the platform sole. They were arranged like their owners had just stepped out of them and walked straight into thin air. The rooftop had this low wall, maybe 4 feet high, running around the perimeter. Modern safety regulations and all that. But right where those shoes were placed, I could see scuff marks on the concrete. Black streaks like someone had been dragging their feet, or been dragged. Then I heard it. This wet, choking sound coming from behind the HVAC unit near the northeast corner. Like someone trying to breathe through liquid. I walked over slowly, my sneakers squeaking against the damp concrete. The city lights below seemed impossibly far away, 23 floors of nothing between me and the street. Behind the unit, I found him. A guy about my age, maybe early 20s, wearing what used to be a white dress shirt. Now it was soaked through with something dark. He was sitting propped against the metal housing, legs splayed out, one hand pressed against his ribs. His face had this grayish tinge, and when he saw me, his eyes went wide. Not with relief, with pure terror. He tried to speak but only managed to cough up more of that dark liquid. I could see now it was coming from a gash across his throat, not deep enough to kill instantly, but deep enough to make talking impossible. I dropped to my knees beside him, yanking off my button-down to press against the wound. My hands were slick within seconds. "What happened?" I kept asking, even though he couldn't answer. "Where is everyone?" His eyes darted to the western edge of the roof, then back to me. He grabbed my wrist with surprising strength and started tapping. 3 taps, pause. 3 taps, pause. SOS. Then he pointed down toward the street and made this horrible gurgling sound that might have been the word, pushed. That's when the sirens started. Not distant city sirens, but close ones, getting louder by the second. Through the gaps in the buildings, I could see the red and blue lights converging from every direction. The guy's grip on my wrist loosened. His eyes were still open but no longer seeing. I stood up, my entire body shaking, and that's when I noticed the door to the rooftop. The heavy steel door I'd struggled to open. It was now chained shut from the outside. The padlock was industrial grade, the kind they use on shipping containers. Fresh scratches on the door frame showed someone had worked fast to secure it. I yanked on the chains until my palms burned, screaming for help even though I knew no one would hear me 23 floors up. The wind carried my voice away like it was nothing. Below, the emergency vehicles had multiplied. I counted at least 8 ambulances, more police cars than I could track. They weren't just responding to a single incident. They were setting up a perimeter around the entire building. I ran back to the western edge where I'd found the shoes. Leaning over carefully, I could see clusters of emergency personnel on the sidewalk. White sheets, yellow tape, the kind of scene you see on the news and immediately change the channel. My phone buzzed. Tyler, finally. But when I looked at the screen, it wasn't a text from him. It was to him, from my phone. Couldn't make it tonight, bro. Studying for bio. Sent at 8:43 p.m. I never wrote that. I was on the purple line at 8:43. Someone had been in my phone changing my story, making sure no one would look for me here. The realization hit like ice water. Whoever did this had planned it carefully. They knew who was coming, had access to everyone's phones, probably sent similar messages from all the victims' devices. I thought about the guy behind the HVAC unit, how he'd tried to warn me. Pushed, he'd said. Someone had pushed people off this roof. And now I was trapped up here with no way down, just like they'd planned. But why leave me alive? Why not push me too? The answer came from the stairwell access on the other side of the roof. Not the door I'd entered through, but a second emergency exit I hadn't noticed before. It opened slowly, and out stepped a woman in a cocktail dress, barefoot, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Melissa, the birthday girl. I recognized her from the cake. She was carrying something in her right hand. At first I thought it was a champagne bottle, but as she stepped into the light, I saw it was a hammer. The claw end was dark with what looked like blood. She saw me and smiled, this broken, empty expression that made her look like a completely different person from the happy girl in the photos scattered on the party tables. "You're late," she said, her voice flat and strange. Everyone else already left. They went over the edge, one by one. Brian first. He's the one who started all this. Then his little followers. They thought they could humiliate me, post those videos, ruin my life. She took a step closer, the hammer swinging loosely at her side. "But I'm smarter than they thought," she continued, wiping her face with her free hand, smearing the mascara worse. I sent the messages from their phones, told everyone the party was canceled, except for the ones who needed to be here, the ones from that night at Brian's apartment. "You weren't there, were you? Tyler said you weren't there." She tilted her head, studying me like I was a puzzle piece that didn't fit. "I watched the security footage a dozen times. You definitely weren't there, which means you're just collateral damage. Wrong place, wrong time. Tyler was supposed to come alone." The sirens below seemed to get louder, and I could hear a helicopter approaching. She glanced up at the sky, then back at me. "They'll be here soon. They'll find you up here with all this evidence. The crazy ex-girlfriend story writes itself, doesn't it? Except I'll be long gone." She walked over to the eastern edge of the roof, where a maintenance ladder led down to a window-washing platform 1 floor below. Before she could reach the ladder, the helicopter spotlight found us. The blast of white light was blinding, and the downdraft from the rotors sent napkins and party decorations swirling through the air like confetti at the world's worst celebration. Melissa raised her hand to shield her eyes, and that's when I moved. Not toward her, I'm no hero, but toward the bar. I grabbed the first bottle I could reach and hurled it at the spotlight. It shattered harmlessly against nothing, but the sound made her turn. In that split second of distraction, Her foot caught on one of the heating cables running across the roof. She stumbled, the hammer flying from her hand and skittering across the concrete. We both lunged for it at the same time. I got there first, barely, my fingers closing around the wooden handle just as hers grabbed my wrist. We struggled for a few seconds that felt like hours, her nails digging into my skin, both of us grunting with effort. Then the rooftop door exploded inward. The chains hadn't been as secure as they looked. Police officers flooded onto the roof, weapons drawn, shouting commands I couldn't process over the helicopter noise. Melissa let go of my wrist and stepped back, raising her hands, but she was still smiling that broken smile. "He killed them all," she screamed over the noise, pointing at me. "I hid in the stairwell, he's crazy. He killed Tyler and Brian and pushed them off." For a terrifying moment, standing there covered in blood from trying to help the dying guy, holding the murder weapon, I thought they might believe her. But then one of the officers spotted something I hadn't seen. A small security camera mounted on the HVAC unit, its red light blinking steadily, recording everything. The arrest was quick. They cuffed her while she kept screaming about how I was the killer, how she was just an innocent victim. It took 3 officers to get her down the stairs. The helicopter peeled away, and suddenly the roof felt impossibly quiet except for the wind and the distant city sounds. An EMT wrapped a blanket around my shoulders while a detective started asking questions. 4 people died that night. 3 pushed from the roof, one who bled out behind the HVAC unit. He'd tried to stop her and paid for it. Tyler survived. Turns out he'd gotten food poisoning from sketchy sushi and never made it to the party. The universe's cruelest joke. The security footage told the whole story. Melissa had spent weeks planning her revenge after a group led by Brian had secretly recorded and shared an intimate video of her at his apartment party. She'd learned about the rooftop birthday party through social media, convinced the actual birthday girl to let her help with planning, then sent fake cancellation messages to everyone except her targets. She drugged the drinks, locked the exits, and methodically pushed 3 people to their deaths. The 4th victim, a server who'd stayed late to clean up, had tried to stop her. The hammer was his. He'd been using it earlier to secure some loose decorations. She killed him behind the HVAC unit and was waiting for Tyler when I showed up instead. The prosecutors said I was lucky. Lucky she recognized I wasn't part of her revenge plan. Lucky the police responded so fast to reports of bodies on the sidewalk. Lucky that security camera was there. I don't feel lucky. I still wake up sometimes thinking I can hear that choking sound, still feel the weight of that hammer in my hand. I changed schools, moved back home to Minneapolis, deleted all my social media. Some nights I dream about those shoes lined up on the edge of the roof, and I wonder if their owners had a moment to understand what was happening before they went over. The news cycle moved on after a few weeks, but I can't. Every time I see a rooftop bar or party venue advertised, I think about how thin the line is between celebration and catastrophe, how someone's worst moment can become a deadly plan, how being late to a party saved my life. Last spring changed everything for me. I was 34, freshly divorced after 8 years of marriage, living in a cramped studio apartment in Denver, while my ex kept our house. The divorce papers had been finalized in March, and by May, I was desperate to feel like myself again. My buddy Jason kept pushing me to try dating apps, said it would help me move on. I worked as an IT consultant, spending most days troubleshooting servers and coming home to microwave dinners and Netflix. The loneliness was crushing, especially on weekends when I used to take road trips with my ex. I'd never done online dating before, met my ex-wife in college, so the whole thing felt foreign and intimidating. The match with Natalie came on a Thursday evening while I was waiting for my laundry to dry at the laundromat down the street. Her profile stood out immediately. She had this warm, genuine smile and listed interests that actually matched mine: hiking, craft beer, true crime podcasts. We started messaging right away, and she had this easy way of making me laugh. sending voice notes with this slight southern accent that made everything sound charming. Within 2 days, we'd moved to texting, and she was sending me photos from her morning runs, asking about my favorite restaurants, sharing playlists. She mentioned she'd just bought a house in Lakewood, about 20 minutes from my place, and was throwing a small housewarming party that Saturday. When she invited me, adding that a few of her girlfriends would be there and they'd love to meet someone new in town, it felt like exactly what I needed, a chance to expand my social circle, maybe start fresh. Saturday arrived with perfect Colorado weather, clear skies, low 70s, the kind of day that makes you forget your troubles. I spent way too long picking out what to wear, finally settling on dark jeans and a button-down that my ex had always said looked good on me. Stopped at a liquor store to grab a nice bottle of wine and some craft beer, wanting to make a good impression. The GPS led me through increasingly quiet residential streets in Lakewood, past well-maintained lawns and kids playing basketball in driveways. The address she'd given me was on Maple Circle, this little cul-de-sac lined with similar-looking 2-story homes. I parked behind a white SUV and checked my reflection in the rearview mirror one more time, trying to calm the butterflies in my stomach. First real date since the divorce. I kept telling myself it was just a casual party, no pressure. The house was the last one on the left, beige siding with dark green shutters and a sold sign still stuck in the front yard. I could hear music coming from inside, something jazzy and mellow. Natalie answered the door before I even finished knocking, and she looked exactly like her photos, maybe even better. She wore this flowing sundress with tiny sunflowers on it, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun. "You must be Bradley," she said, pulling me into a quick hug that smelled like vanilla and something floral. Behind her, I could see into a living room that still had boxes stacked against the walls. 2 other women appeared, a tall redhead she introduced as Chloe, wearing ripped jeans and a vintage band tee, and a shorter brunette named Veronica in a black jumpsuit. They both smiled warmly, Chloe taking the wine and beer from my hands while Veronica complimented my shirt. The house smelled like fresh paint mixed with scented candles, and I noticed plastic still on some of the light fixtures, painter's tape on a few baseboards. They led me into the kitchen where Chloe was already opening one of the beers I'd brought. The kitchen was gorgeous. White cabinets, granite countertops, one of those farmhouse sinks I'd always wanted. Natalie asked what I did for work, leaning against the counter while Veronica rummaged through boxes looking for more glasses. They seemed genuinely interested when I explained about IT consulting, Chloe mentioning her brother worked in tech too. The conversation flowed easily. They asked about my favorite hiking trails, shared funny stories about their own dating disasters, made me feel included. Natalie kept touching my arm when she laughed, maintaining this eye contact that made my pulse quicken. After about 15 minutes, Veronica suggested we move to the living room where it was more comfortable. She'd found some wine glasses and poured generous amounts of red wine, handing me one with a wink. "This is my special blend," she said. "Brought it back from a vineyard in Napa last month." The living room had this huge sectional couch still wrapped in plastic, which Natalie apologized for, saying the real furniture was coming next week. We sat on folding chairs they'd arranged in a circle, and I took a long sip of the wine. It had an unusual aftertaste, almost metallic, but I figured it was just some fancy vintage I wasn't sophisticated enough to appreciate. The women kept the conversation going, asking about my divorce in a sympathetic way that didn't feel invasive. Chloe shared that she'd been through one too, understood how isolating it could be. The room started feeling warmer, and I noticed my vision going slightly fuzzy around the edges. Figured I was just nervous, drinking too fast on an empty stomach. Natalie moved her chair closer to mine, her knee brushing against my leg. "You okay?" she asked, but her voice sounded like it was coming through water. Veronica and Chloe were watching me intently now, and I tried to stand up, but my legs felt like rubber. The wine glass slipped from my fingers, red liquid spreading across the hardwood floor like blood. Everything happened fast after that, though my brain processed it in slow motion. The 3 women stood up simultaneously, their warm smiles replaced by something cold and businesslike. Natalie wasn't looking at me with flirtation anymore. She was going through my pockets with practiced efficiency, pulling out my wallet, car keys, phone. I tried to speak, but my tongue felt thick and useless. Chloe had put on latex gloves and was scrolling through my phone, somehow bypassing the lock screen. "Banking apps are here," she said in a flat voice, nothing like the friendly tone from earlier. Veronica came back from the kitchen with zip ties and began securing my wrists behind my back. I wanted to fight, to scream, but my body wouldn't respond. They worked like a choreographed team, barely speaking except for short, clinical updates. "Got the pin from his notes app," Chloe announced. "Social security cards in his wallet," Natalie added. My vision kept fading in and out, but I caught glimpses of them transferring money, taking photos of my documents. The fear was paralyzing, made worse by my complete helplessness. They dragged me through the house, my legs scraping uselessly against the floor, and I realized we were going out a back door I hadn't noticed before. The backyard connected to another property, a house that looked abandoned with boarded-up windows and overgrown grass. They pulled me through a broken section of fence, my shirt catching and tearing on the splintered wood. Inside the abandoned house, the smell hit me immediately. Mold, decay, and something else, maybe animals. They dumped me on the floor in what must have been a bedroom, empty except for stained carpet and graffiti on the walls. Natalie crouched down beside me, and for a second, I thought maybe she'd show some remorse. Instead, she patted my cheek with mock sympathy. "Should have been more careful, Bradley. Recently divorced guys are always the easiest marks." Chloe was wiping down my phone with some kind of cloth, and Veronica was going through my car keys, separating the car fob from the rest. Then the violence started. Veronica kicked me hard in the ribs, and even through the drug haze, the pain exploded through my chest. "Just making sure it looks like a mugging," she said matter-of-factly. Another kick, this time to my stomach. Chloe joined in, stomping on my hand until I heard something crack. They were methodical about it, careful not to hit my face too much, nothing that would seem excessive for a robbery gone wrong. Through tears and the fog in my brain, I heard them discussing their plan. My car would be found abandoned across town. The dating app messages had already been deleted from both sides. The house they'd used wasn't theirs, belonged to some snowbird couple who wouldn't be back until fall. They'd done this before, Natalie mentioned casually, something about Phoenix and Portland. Different cities, different names, same system. Target lonely men, preferably going through life changes, less likely to have people checking on them regularly. The pain kept coming in waves, but worse than the physical hurt was the humiliation, the stupid blind trust I'd shown. I must have passed out eventually because when I came to, they were gone and darkness had fallen outside. The zip ties were still cutting into my wrists, my ribs screaming with every breath. My mouth tasted like copper. I'd bitten my tongue at some point. The abandoned house was pitch black except for slivers of streetlight through the boarded windows. Every movement was agony, but I knew I had to get help. I rolled onto my stomach, using my knees to inch toward what I thought was the door. The carpet was damp in places, sticking to my skin. Took me what felt like hours to reach the hallway, then another eternity to find stairs. Going down was a nightmare. I basically had to throw myself down each step, praying I wouldn't break my neck. At the bottom, I could see the front door, but it was boarded shut. Panic set in until I remembered the back door they'd brought me through. More crawling, more pain, leaving what I was sure was a trail of blood from my torn knees. The back door was still open, thank God. I managed to wriggle through and collapsed in the overgrown backyard, gasping at the cool night air. A dog started barking somewhere nearby, and I tried to yell for help, but only managed a hoarse croak. Somehow, I got to my feet and stumbled through the gap in the fence, back toward the house where it had all started. The sold sign mocked me from the front yard. I made it to the street and saw an elderly man walking a small terrier. He took one look at me, bloodied, hands bound behind my back, clothes torn, and immediately called 911. The police arrived within minutes, followed by an ambulance. As the paramedics cut the zip ties and checked my injuries, I tried to explain what happened. The officers took notes, but I could see the skepticism in their eyes. Another idiot who met someone online and got rolled. They went to check the house, came back saying it was empty. No sign anyone had been there recently, except some spilled wine on the floor. The detective who visited me in the hospital the next day was more sympathetic. Detective Howell, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes but a no-nonsense demeanor, told me I was lucky to be alive. They'd found my car abandoned at a park and ride near the airport, completely wiped clean. My bank accounts had been drained, almost $8,000 gone in various transfers and ATM withdrawals. Credit cards maxed out on gift card purchases. But what she told me next made my stomach turn. I wasn't the first. They'd been tracking similar cases across 6 states over the past year. Always the same pattern: attractive woman on dating apps, recent divorcees or widowers, a house party or viewing that turned into robbery and assault. The abandoned properties were always homes for sale or vacation rentals, places that wouldn't be immediately checked. They estimated at least 15 victims, though she suspected more hadn't come forward out of embarrassment. The women were professionals, possibly part of a larger ring. They'd never been caught on security cameras that worked, always chose houses in spots with poor coverage. My case might help, she said, because I'd survived and could give detailed descriptions. But I could tell from her tone she wasn't optimistic. These women were ghosts, probably already in another state, creating new profiles, finding new targets. It's been 4 months now, and I've mostly recovered physically. The ribs healed, the broken fingers work fine, though they ache when it rains. Got most of my money back through the bank's fraud protection, though it took weeks of paperwork and phone calls. I moved to a better apartment with actual security, changed all my passwords, got a new phone number, but the real recovery is slower. I still flinch when unknown numbers call. Dating apps are completely out of the question. Deleted them all that night in the hospital. Jason thinks I'm being paranoid, that I can't let one horrible experience ruin my chances at finding someone. But he doesn't understand what it's like to have your trust weaponized against you like that. Detective Howell calls occasionally with updates. They arrested a woman in Seattle who might have been Chloe, but the charges didn't stick. No solid evidence. The investigation is still open but moved to the back burner. I've accepted they'll probably never be caught. Started seeing a therapist who specializes in trauma, and she's helping me work through the shame and anger. Some days are better than others. I'm sharing this story because I know there are other guys out there who went through something similar and kept quiet. You're not stupid for trusting someone. You're not weak for being targeted. These people are predators who know exactly which buttons to push. All we can do is warn others and try to rebuild. And maybe, if enough of us speak up, they'll eventually make a mistake that gets them caught. Weekend getaways used to be my favorite thing in the world. 5 of us college friends would rent a cabin somewhere remote, disconnect from our phones, and just laugh until our stomachs hurt. That's exactly what we did in August 2018 for my best friend Jessica's bachelorette party. We found this gorgeous 3-bedroom place up in the mountains of Oregon, complete with a hot tub and a wraparound deck that overlooked these massive pine trees. I was 26 at the time, recently promoted to senior marketing coordinator, and honestly felt like everything in my life was finally falling into place. Jessica had been planning this wedding for 2 years, and as her maid of honor, I wanted everything to be absolutely perfect for her last weekend as a single woman. The group was tight. We'd all known each other since freshman year at Oregon State. There was Jessica, obviously, the bride-to-be with her infectious laugh and tendency to plan everything down to the minute. Then there was Amy, the perpetual party girl who could drink anyone under the table and still wake up at 7 a.m. for a run. Stephanie was our voice of reason, the one who always carried extra water bottles and made sure everyone got home safe. And finally, there was Olivia, Jessica's childhood friend from California who'd transferred to our school junior year. Olivia had this competitive streak that made every game night intense, every conversation passionate, and every drink a challenge to be conquered. She was the one person in our group who never knew when to stop. We arrived Friday afternoon with enough alcohol to stock a small bar. I'm talking 3 bottles of champagne, a handle of vodka, wine for dinner, and this fancy tequila that Olivia insisted we needed for proper shots. The cabin was even more beautiful than the photos. Rustic wood everywhere, a stone fireplace, and huge windows that made you feel like you were living inside a nature documentary. We spent the first evening relatively calm, sipping wine on the deck, sharing embarrassing stories about Jessica's dating life before she met her fiancé. Olivia seemed normal that night, maybe a glass or 2 more than the rest of us, but nothing alarming. She was animated, telling these hilarious stories about her job at some tech startup, making us all crack up with her impressions of her awkward boss. Saturday morning started innocent enough. We made this elaborate brunch spread, mimosas, eggs Benedict, the whole 9 yards. That's when Olivia suggested we play drinking games to really get the party started. She pulled out this deck of cards and announced we were playing kings, but with her own twisted rules that basically guaranteed everyone would be hammered by noon. Amy laughed and said she was game. Stephanie rolled her eyes but went along with it, and Jessica was too excited to care. I should have seen the warning signs then. The way Olivia's eyes lit up when she talked about drinking, how she'd already finished 2 mimosas while the rest of us were still working on our first. But it was a bachelorette party, right? Everyone was supposed to get a little crazy. The game started simple enough, but Olivia kept escalating everything. Every time someone drew a card that meant, take a drink, she'd take 3. When it was her turn to make a rule, she'd create these elaborate challenges that involved chugging entire drinks. By 2 p.m., the rest of us were giggly and tipsy, but Olivia was somewhere else entirely. Her words started slurring together, and she kept insisting we needed to catch up to her level. She'd stumble to the kitchen island where we'd lined up all the bottles and pour these massive shots, downing them like water. Amy tried to joke about it, saying, "Slow down there, champ." But Olivia just laughed this weird, hollow laugh and poured another one. The competitive thing that used to be charming about her had turned into something desperate and frightening. What made it worse was how determined she became to prove she could outdrink all of us. When Stephanie suggested maybe we should eat something or switch to water, Olivia got genuinely angry. Not just annoyed, angry. She started ranting about how we were being boring and how this was supposed to be the wildest bachelorette party ever. She kept pointing at Jessica and saying things like, "This is for you, babe," before taking another shot. Jessica started looking uncomfortable, but Olivia was so far gone she couldn't read the room anymore. Her face had this flushed, almost purple tint to it, and her pupils were dilated in this unsettling way. She kept gripping the kitchen counter like she needed it for balance, but every time one of us asked if she was okay, she'd snap that she was totally fine and reach for another drink. Around 4 p.m., things got really scary. Olivia had switched from mixed drinks to straight vodka, and she was taking these massive pulls directly from the bottle. Amy physically tried to take it away from her, and Olivia shoved her back with surprising force, screaming about how nobody understood what she was going through. That's when she started talking about her ex-boyfriend from 2 years ago, crying and rambling about how he'd left her for someone prettier and less damaged. None of us had ever heard her mention him before. It was like the alcohol had unlocked this completely different person. She was swaying on her feet, occasionally grabbing onto furniture to steady herself, but still insisting she needed just one more to feel better. The way she kept wiping at her nose made me wonder if there was something else going on, but I was too scared and inexperienced to know what to do. Then it happened. We were all sitting in the living room trying to convince Olivia to come join us and watch a movie, when she suddenly went completely silent. Not the good kind of quiet, the terrifying kind where someone just stops mid-sentence and stares at nothing. She was standing by the kitchen island, holding that vodka bottle, and her face went from flushed red to this awful gray color in seconds. Her eyes rolled back in her head, and she made this horrible gurgling sound before her knees gave out completely. The bottle shattered when it hit the floor, and Olivia went down with it, her body convulsing in ways that didn't look human. Jessica started screaming. Amy was shouting, "Call 911," and Stephanie was already on her phone. I just stood there watching Olivia's body jerk and twist on the kitchen floor, surrounded by broken glass and vodka, foam coming out of her mouth. The paramedics took forever to find us. The cabin was so remote that our GPS kept giving them wrong directions. While we waited, Amy tried to clear Olivia's airway and put her in the recovery position like she'd learned in some first aid class years ago. But Olivia kept making these awful choking sounds, and her skin was turning this bluish color that made my chest tighten with panic. Jessica was hyperventilating, convinced this was somehow her fault for not stopping the drinking games sooner. Stephanie kept running outside to flag down the ambulance, checking her phone for updates. When they finally arrived, the paramedics took one look at Olivia and immediately started working with this urgent efficiency that told us everything we needed to know about how serious this was. They got an IV in her arm, strapped her to a stretcher, and rushed her down the mountain toward the hospital in town. We followed the ambulance in Jessica's car, none of us speaking, just listening to the radio chatter from emergency services and watching those red lights disappear around mountain curves. At the hospital, they wouldn't let us see her right away. We sat in this sterile waiting room for what felt like hours, drinking terrible coffee from the vending machine and avoiding each other's eyes. When the doctor finally came out, he looked exhausted and grim. He explained that Olivia's blood alcohol level was dangerously high, 0.4 something, way beyond what should have killed her. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was when he told us about her liver. Apparently, it had been failing for months, maybe longer. Years of heavy drinking had essentially turned it into scar tissue, and this binge had pushed her body past the point of no return. None of us had any idea she'd been struggling with alcohol that badly. The next 3 days were a blur of hospital visits, hushed conversations with her parents who flew in from California, and this crushing weight of guilt that settled over all of us. Olivia never regained consciousness. Her body just couldn't process the toxins anymore, and on Tuesday morning, her parents made the decision to take her off life support. Jessica postponed her wedding indefinitely. Amy started going to therapy. Stephanie threw away every bottle of alcohol in her apartment. And me? I still can't drink anything stronger than beer without seeing Olivia's face turning gray, hearing that awful gurgling sound she made before she collapsed. The doctors said she'd been hiding her drinking problem for at least 2 years, probably longer. All those times we thought she was just the fun party girl in our group. She was actually slowly killing herself, and we were too caught up in our own lives to notice the signs. What haunts me most is that we enabled it that day. We laughed when she kept escalating the drinking games. We thought her competitiveness was entertaining instead of recognizing it as desperation. Even when she got angry and aggressive, we treated it like typical drunk behavior instead of the cry for help it actually was. The cabin weekend was supposed to be about celebrating Jessica's new life, but instead, it became the place where our friend died, because none of us knew how to say no when someone clearly needed us to stop them. I've learned to live with that guilt, but it changed everything about how I see friendship, how I see responsibility, and how I see the difference between having fun and enabling someone's self-destruction. Olivia deserved friends who would have saved her from herself, and we failed her completely. Three days after graduation, everything changed forever. It was June 2017, and we'd just finished our ceremony at Franklin High in Phoenix, Arizona. The whole senior class was buzzing with that electric energy of freedom. No more tests, no more homework, just pure summer stretching ahead before college started. I was 18, fresh out of high school, spending my days at home helping my mom reorganize the garage, and my nights hanging out with friends who'd soon be scattered across different states. The heat that summer was brutal, even by Arizona standards, with temperatures hitting 115 degrees during the day and barely dropping below 90 at night. Everyone was constantly talking about pools, air conditioning, and any excuse to stay cool. Madison Torres was the kind of girl who seemed to have everything figured out even in high school. She lived in this massive house in the Ahwatukee foothills with her dad, who owned a chain of car dealerships, and her stepmom, who spent most of her time at yoga classes and charity lunches. Madison had been class president, captain of the debate team, and somehow managed to get into Stanford on a partial scholarship, despite having more money than most of our families combined. She was tall, probably 5'8", with this thick black hair that always seemed perfectly styled no matter what. And she had this way of making everyone feel like they were her best friend even when she barely knew their names. The party was her idea, a massive graduation celebration at her house complete with a DJ, catered food, and that gorgeous kidney-shaped pool that dominated their backyard. The invitation went out through Instagram and Snapchat, and within hours it seemed like our entire graduating class plus half the juniors had committed to coming. Madison's house was perfect for parties. It sat on this elevated lot with a view of the valley, surrounded by tall privacy walls and mature palm trees that created natural sound barriers. Her parents were conveniently out of town for the weekend, visiting her older brother at ASU, which meant we had free reign of the place. I remember driving up that winding driveway around 7 p.m., music already pumping from the backyard, the smell of barbecue mixing with chlorine and expensive perfume drifting through the desert air. Cars were parked everywhere, BMWs next to beat-up Toyotas, the whole social hierarchy of high school represented in that circular driveway. Kennedy Walsh was already there when I arrived, and honestly, she was impossible to miss. She had this platinum blonde hair that she'd bleached so many times it looked almost white under the pool lights, and she was wearing this tiny red bikini that left nothing to the imagination. Kennedy had always been what adults politely called spirited. She was loud, impulsive, and had a reputation for getting into drama wherever she went. She'd been suspended twice senior year, once for getting into a screaming match with a teacher, and once for showing up to class obviously drunk. But she was also hilarious when she wanted to be, and she had this magnetic personality that drew people in even when they knew she was trouble. That night, she was already 3 drinks deep when I got there, laughing too loudly at everything and doing cannonballs into the pool, despite Madison's obvious annoyance about water splashing onto the expensive patio furniture. The first few hours were exactly what you'd expect from a high school party. People jumping in and out of the pool, clusters of friends gossiping by the outdoor bar, couples sneaking off to darker corners of the yard. The DJ was playing all the hits from our senior year, and every few minutes someone would shriek with excitement when their favorite song came on. I spent most of the early evening catching up with people I hadn't seen much since graduation, nursing a beer and trying to stay cool in the oppressive heat. Madison was the perfect hostess, floating between groups with this genuine smile, making sure everyone had drinks and food, occasionally diving into the pool in this elegant way that barely made a splash. She had this gift for making everyone feel included, even the kids who usually hung around the edges of social events. Around 10 p.m., more people started showing up, including some faces I didn't recognize, friends of friends, plus ones, the inevitable party crashers who somehow always found their way to the good parties. But Kennedy was getting progressively drunker and more belligerent as the night went on. She kept making these passive-aggressive comments about Madison's house, calling it Daddy's Money Palace, and asking loudly if the pool water was imported from France. At one point, she cornered Madison near the outdoor kitchen and started this whole rant about how fake everyone was being, how we were all just pretending to be friends when really we couldn't wait to never see each other again. Madison handled it with way more grace than I would have. She just smiled and offered to get Kennedy some water, maybe some of the fancy appetizers her family had catered. But Kennedy wasn't having it. She kept pushing, kept escalating, and I could see other people starting to notice the tension. The music seemed louder suddenly, but not loud enough to drown out Kennedy's voice as she got more and more animated, gesturing wildly with a red Solo cup that was definitely not her first of the evening. The whole thing exploded around 11:30. I was sitting on one of those expensive lounge chairs, talking to my friend Connor about his plans for community college, when we heard Kennedy screaming at someone near the diving board. She was face to face with Trevor Martinez, this quiet kid from our chemistry class who'd never bothered anyone in his life. Apparently, Kennedy had accused him of staring at her, and when he tried to apologize and walk away, she grabbed his arm and started yelling about how all the guys at our school were creepy perverts. Trevor looked mortified, his face bright red under the pool lights, and he kept trying to back away while Kennedy followed him, jabbing her finger at his chest. A crowd started forming. You know how it is at parties. Drama draws people like moths to a flame. Madison appeared out of nowhere, trying to calm Kennedy down, but Kennedy turned on her immediately, screaming about how Madison thought she was better than everyone else, how she was just a spoiled princess who'd never faced a real problem in her life. That's when it happened. Kennedy shoved Madison hard, right in the chest, and Madison stumbled backward toward the pool. But Madison caught herself on the metal railing, and when she straightened up, there was this look on her face I'd never seen before. Not anger exactly, but something colder. She said something quietly to Kennedy, something I couldn't hear over the music and the crowd, but whatever it was made Kennedy absolutely lose it. Kennedy lunged forward, swinging wildly, and that's when Trevor stepped between them, not to hurt anyone, just to separate them. But Kennedy was so drunk and off balance that when Trevor put his hands up defensively, she stumbled sideways. Everyone saw it happen, but it was like watching it in slow motion. Kennedy's feet got tangled up, her arms windmilled as she tried to catch herself, and then she pitched forward and hit the water with this horrible, loud slap that cut through all the party noise like a knife. For a few seconds, everyone just stood there in shock. The DJ kept playing, but conversations died all around the pool as people turned to stare at the ripples spreading across the water where Kennedy had gone under. She surfaced almost immediately, sputtering and cursing, her platinum hair plastered to her head, and that red bikini now a darker shade from the chlorinated water. A few people laughed nervously, the kind of uncomfortable laughter that happens when something awkward breaks the tension at a party. Kennedy treaded water for a moment, looking disoriented, then swam to the shallow end and climbed out using the ladder. She was dripping wet and obviously embarrassed, makeup running down her cheeks in black streaks, but she tried to play it off like it was no big deal. Madison immediately went to get her towels, apologizing even though it wasn't really anyone's fault, and within minutes the party had mostly returned to normal. Kennedy wrapped herself in a fluffy white towel and disappeared into the house, presumably to clean up and maybe find some dry clothes. The party continued for another 2 hours, but the energy had shifted. People were more subdued, conversations quieter, and I noticed several groups leaving earlier than they probably would have otherwise. Connor and I decided to call it a night around 1:30 a.m., and as we were walking to our cars, I remember thinking that Kennedy had probably already gone home or was passed out in one of Madison's guest bedrooms. The house was still full of people, music still playing, but it had that late-night party feeling where everything starts to feel a little desperate and sad. Madison was by the front door saying goodbye to people, still being the perfect hostess despite everything that had happened. She looked tired but relieved, like she was ready for everyone to leave so she could start cleaning up the inevitable mess. I waved goodbye to her and didn't think anything more about Kennedy Walsh until my phone started buzzing with frantic calls and texts the next morning. It was Connor who called me first, his voice shaking in a way I'd never heard before. Kennedy was dead. They'd found her body at the bottom of Madison's pool around 6 a.m. when the cleaning crew arrived to start dealing with the aftermath of the party. At first, everyone assumed she'd gone back in for a swim after cleaning up, maybe still drunk, maybe just trying to cool off in the morning heat. Tragic accident, they said. Drowning happens, especially when alcohol is involved. But then the autopsy results came back 3 days later, and everything changed. The medical examiner found water in her lungs, yes, but also something else. Evidence that she'd been unconscious before she went into the water. There were no obvious signs of trauma, no head injuries that would explain why she'd passed out. But the toxicology report showed something weird in her system beyond just alcohol. Something that shouldn't have been there. Something that would have made her disoriented and drowsy within minutes of ingesting it. The police started interviewing everyone who'd been at the party, and that's when the real horror began. Nobody could account for Kennedy's whereabouts between when she'd gone inside to change around 11:45 and when her body was discovered the next morning. Madison swore she'd assumed Kennedy had left through the front door, like so many other people that night. The cleaning crew found her floating face down in the deep end, still wearing that red bikini, her platinum hair spread out like seaweed in the chlorinated water. But here's the thing that still keeps me awake at night. The pool lights had motion sensors, and according to the electronic logs, they hadn't turned on at all between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m., which means either Kennedy had been in that water since before 2 in the morning, or someone had disabled the sensors before putting her there. The investigation went on for months, but they never found who did it or how or why. The case went cold, Madison's family moved away before school started, and the rest of us scattered to our different colleges carrying this horrible secret that we'd all been there the night Kennedy Walsh died, and not one of us could explain what really happened to her. "7 years ago, I was 3 weeks away from marrying Rebecca, the woman I'd been dating since college. Kevin, my best man and college roommate, had organized what he called the ultimate bachelor weekend at this secluded Airbnb in rural Pennsylvania. The listing showed this incredible log cabin surrounded by dense woods, complete with a hot tub, game room, and enough space for our group of 6 guys. I was working as a software engineer at the time, pulling crazy hours to finish a project before my honeymoon, and honestly, I needed the break. Kevin had been planning this thing for months, coordinating with everyone, making sure we had the perfect setup for what was supposed to be my last hurrah as a single man. The cabin exceeded every expectation when we pulled up that Friday evening in January. Massive timber beams, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a frozen creek, and this incredible stone fireplace that dominated the main living area. My buddies were already cracking jokes about how this place was way too nice for a bunch of guys, but we were all pumped. There was Jake, who worked construction and always brought the best stories, Tommy from my hometown, who'd driven 6 hours just to be there, Chris, who was Rebecca's brother and took his role as future brother-in-law very seriously, and Nick, our wild card, who somehow always ended up in the craziest situations. We spent that first night exactly how you'd expect, grilling steaks, playing poker until 3 a.m., sharing embarrassing stories about each other, and just enjoying being away from everything. Saturday was perfect too. We hiked through the snowy trails behind the cabin, had a snowball fight like we were kids again, and spent the afternoon in the hot tub with beers, planning out the rest of the weekend. Around 7 p.m., Kevin suggested we check out this local bar he'd found called the Rusty Anchor, about 15 minutes down this winding mountain road. The place was exactly what you'd picture, dimly lit, classic rock playing, locals nursing beers and watching college basketball on the old TV above the bar. We grabbed a corner booth and were having a great time, probably being a bit too loud and obnoxious like groups of guys tend to be. That's when Vanessa and Courtney approached our table, and honestly, at first I thought they were going to tell us to keep it down. Instead, Vanessa, this stunning blonde with bright green eyes and a laugh that could light up a room, slid right into the booth next to me and started chatting like we'd known each other forever. Courtney was more reserved, brunette with these intricate tattoos covering her arms, but she had this mysterious vibe that immediately drew Nick in. They told us they were from a nearby town, just out for drinks on a Saturday night, and seemed genuinely interested in hearing about our bachelor weekend. Vanessa kept buying rounds, insisting it was her treat since we were celebrating, and both women had these incredible stories about growing up in rural Pennsylvania. They knew all the local spots, recommended this amazing breakfast place for Sunday morning, and honestly seemed like exactly the kind of spontaneous fun that makes bachelor weekends legendary. When the bar started closing down around midnight, Vanessa suggested they come back to the cabin with us. She mentioned having a bottle of really good whiskey in her car that she'd been saving for a special occasion, and Courtney chimed in that she made these incredible mixed drinks that would put any bartender to shame. The guys were all for it, and honestly, I was having such a good time that I didn't even think twice about it. These women seemed cool, fun, and completely harmless. We caravanned back to the cabin, their beat-up Honda following us down those dark mountain roads, headlights cutting through the trees like some kind of movie scene. When we got back, Vanessa was true to her word about that whiskey. It was this expensive bottle I'd never heard of, and she poured generous shots for everyone while Courtney mixed these elaborate cocktails with ingredients she somehow had in her purse. The next couple hours were honestly some of the best of the whole weekend. We played drinking games, shared more stories, and both women fit right in with our group dynamic. Vanessa had this way of making everyone feel like they were the most interesting person in the room, asking detailed questions about our jobs, our relationships, our plans for the future. Courtney was quieter but had this dry sense of humor that caught you off guard and made you laugh until your sides hurt. Around 2 a.m., she suggested we all do shots of this special vodka she had mixed with some kind of herbal liqueur she called a family recipe. It tasted weird, kind of bitter with this medicinal aftertaste, but she insisted it was a traditional Pennsylvania drink that would give us the best sleep of our lives. Kevin made a joke about how we needed good sleep before our last day of partying, and we all threw back the shots like idiots. That's when things started getting weird. Within maybe 20 minutes, Jake started complaining that he felt dizzy and nauseous. Tommy was slurring his words way more than he should have been considering how much we'd had to drink, and Chris just kept saying he needed to lie down because the room was spinning. I remember thinking it was strange because we'd all had plenty to drink before without getting this messed up this fast. Nick was the first one to actually get sick, rushing to the bathroom and throwing up violently. These awful retching sounds that echoed through the whole cabin. Vanessa and Courtney seemed completely sober though, which struck me as odd since they'd been drinking right along with us all night. Vanessa kept rubbing my shoulders and telling me to just relax, that everything was fine, while Courtney was helping the other guys to various bedrooms and couches. The last thing I clearly remember was sitting on that leather couch in the main room, my vision getting blurry, and my thoughts becoming completely scrambled. Vanessa was sitting across from me, and I swear her whole demeanor had changed. She wasn't laughing and bubbly anymore, just watching me with these cold, calculating eyes. I tried to ask her what was in that drink, but my words came out as mumbled nonsense, and my limbs suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds each. Courtney came back into the room and said something to Vanessa that I couldn't make out, like they were speaking through water or from really far away. The room started tilting sideways, and despite every instinct telling me that something was terribly wrong, I couldn't fight whatever was happening to my body. The last image burned into my memory before everything went black was both women standing over me, no longer smiling, just staring down with expressions I'd never seen on their faces before. I woke up on the hardwood floor of the main room with the worst headache of my entire life, like someone had taken a sledgehammer to the inside of my skull. Sunlight was streaming through those big windows, which meant it had to be late morning or early afternoon, but I had no idea what day it was or how long I'd been unconscious. My mouth tasted like I'd been chewing on pennies, and my whole body ached like I'd been hit by a truck. As I struggled to sit up, everything around me came into focus, and what I saw made my heart start pounding so hard I thought it might explode. The entire cabin looked like a tornado had torn through it. Couch cushions thrown everywhere, drawers pulled out and dumped, our luggage scattered across the floor with clothes spilling out. The TV was gone, the sound system was gone, even the expensive coffee maker from the kitchen counter had vanished, but the real panic set in when I started calling out for my friends and got nothing but silence in return. I stumbled through the cabin, my legs still shaky and unsteady, checking every bedroom and finding them all empty. Their beds looked slept in, but there was no sign of Jake, Tommy, Chris, Nick, or Kevin anywhere in the house. I ran outside, still in yesterday's clothes, and immediately noticed that Tommy's truck was completely gone from the driveway. Our rental car was still there, but when I checked my pockets, my wallet, phone, and keys were all missing. The other guys' phones were nowhere to be found either, and when I searched through the remaining luggage, every single wallet had been cleaned out. I found Chris's driver's license on the floor of his bedroom, Jake's credit cards scattered under the kitchen table, but all the cash, the cards they hadn't dropped, everything valuable was gone. The worst part was not knowing where my friends were or if they were even alive. I had no phone, no way to contact anyone, and we were in the middle of nowhere with the nearest neighbor probably miles away. I spent what felt like hours searching every inch of the property, calling their names until my voice was hoarse, checking the woods behind the cabin in case they'd wandered off disoriented like I had been. Finally, I decided to walk down that mountain road to try to find help, and after about 40 minutes of stumbling along in my hungover state, I reached a gas station with an old payphone. The clerk, this elderly guy with kind eyes, let me use his personal cell phone when I explained what happened, though I could tell he thought I was either lying or insane. I called Kevin's girlfriend first, and she told me that all 5 of my friends had shown up at Kevin's apartment that morning, confused and missing their wallets and phones, but physically unharmed. Turns out, Vanessa and Courtney had somehow gotten my friends into Tommy's truck while they were all unconscious, and dumped them at a 24-hour diner about 30 miles away, keeping the truck for themselves. The guys had woken up in the parking lot around dawn, just as disoriented as I was, and had to rely on the kindness of strangers to call for rides home. When we filed the police report later that day, the officers told us this was part of a pattern they'd been tracking. These 2 women had been targeting groups of men at bars throughout rural Pennsylvania for months, using some kind of powerful sedative to rob them blind. The cabin's security cameras, which we didn't even know existed, caught everything on tape, including clear shots of both women's faces as they methodically ransacked the place and loaded our stuff into Tommy's truck. We never got Tommy's truck back, and most of our belongings were never recovered, but at least we were all alive and relatively unharmed. The experience taught me to never trust strangers who seem too good to be true, no matter how charming they might be. I hadn't planned on going. The idea of revisiting high school felt like flipping through an old photo album you never really liked. Forced smiles, bad lighting, memories you didn't want to remember. But my sister convinced me. "You should show your face, Claire," she said, "even if it's just for an hour." So I went. It was held in the event room of an aging country club about 20 minutes outside of town. Carpet that smelled like wet wood, flickering sconces, and a bar that looked like it hadn't been restocked since the early 2000s. I got there late, hoping to avoid the awkward introductions and see only a few familiar faces before slipping out unnoticed. Most people hadn't changed much. A little thicker around the waist, a little more tired behind the eyes but still trapped in their same high school roles. The class clown still laughed too loud. The prom queen still wore heels that screamed for attention. I found a corner near the drinks table and stuck to it, nursing a flat soda and checking the time more often than I should have. I barely exchanged 5 words the first 30 minutes. It wasn't that I disliked people. I just never quite knew how to insert myself into conversations that already had a decade of shared stories between them. Around 45 minutes in, I slipped away to the restroom just to take a breath. The hallway was dim and narrow, the kind of corridor that muffled sound and made your footsteps feel too loud. Inside the bathroom, I stood at the sink, looking at myself under the harsh fluorescent lights. I remember thinking how strange it was to feel like a ghost at your own reunion, present, but detached from everyone. Then someone shouted, muffled at first, then sharper, a man's voice, rising quickly into rage. My first instinct was that someone was drunk. It was that kind of event after all, but then I heard glass shatter. A woman screamed, short and sharp, like something had jumped out of nowhere. My heart started racing before I could even process what was happening. I moved slowly to the bathroom door, cracked it just enough to peek out. What I saw made my mouth go dry. A man I barely recognized, tall, pale, sweat soaked through his button-down, was standing in the middle of the room with something in his hand. It took me a second to realize it was a gun. His voice was hoarse from yelling, but clear enough. "You all think you're better than me? You think you can forget what you did?" I didn't know his name at first. His face had changed. He'd lost a lot of weight and his hair was shaved close to the scalp, almost like he was trying to erase some version of himself. But the way he stood, hunched but vibrating with anger, struck something familiar. Then it clicked. His name was Lucas Grant. He'd transferred to our school halfway through junior year and left just before graduation. I remembered him as quiet, always by himself, always wearing headphones and hoodies even in the heat. No one had been outright cruel, but he wasn't exactly welcomed either. I don't think I ever said more than "excuse me" to him in the hallway. I backed away from the door slowly and locked it without a sound. My breathing was too loud, so I cupped my hand over my mouth and slid down the wall, trying not to think about how thin the door was. I could hear his voice carrying down the hall now. He was pacing, shouting names I half recognized, accusing people of things I couldn't make sense of. "You laughed when I got jumped. You told them where I lived. You left me bleeding in the parking lot like a stray dog." Each sentence hit like a hammer, and I couldn't tell if he was lying or remembering something real no one else wanted to admit. What terrified me most wasn't the gun. It was the silence that followed, a silence that stretched too long, thick and strange, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Then came a voice, calm, older, maybe a teacher. "Lucas, you don't have to do this. No one here wants to hurt you." And then his answer, almost laughing, "Hurt me? You already did. All of you did." I pressed both hands to the floor to ground myself, feeling the cold tile through my fingertips, hoping it would distract me from the thought that we were trapped. The event space only had one main exit. If he stood near it, they couldn't get out. From behind the locked bathroom door, all I could do was listen. I heard shuffling, a crash, someone crying. Lucas was still ranting, but his words had started unraveling, spilling out faster, less coherent, more desperate. He wasn't yelling anymore. He was pleading. "You don't know what it's like to be erased, to walk into a room and not exist." I felt something shift in me then. It's hard to explain, but hearing him like that, it wasn't just fear I felt. It was recognition. A strange kind of echo. Like he was voicing things I'd buried under years of silence. But that recognition only made the moment more terrifying. I must have stayed in that bathroom for another 5 or 6 minutes, but it felt like hours. I kept thinking someone was going to try the door handle. I kept imagining hearing footsteps coming straight toward me. But what I actually heard next was shouting from a different kind of voice. Firm, loud, practiced. Police. Then boots. So many of them. Commands being barked, a mix of yelling and crying. I couldn't make out all the words, just fragments. "Drop it now!" and "hands where I can see them." The sounds of chairs scraping, someone sobbing, and then silence again. A heavy, final silence that didn't feel like before. This one felt drained, done. I waited until I heard a knock on the bathroom door. A female officer identified herself, told me it was safe. I opened the door slowly, still crouched, not even realizing how stiff my legs had gotten. The room outside was in disarray, tables overturned, cups and napkins scattered, a couple people sitting on the floor like they didn't trust their own knees anymore. Lucas was already gone. I never saw him again. I asked what happened, and one of the officers told me they'd gotten to him before anything worse happened. He never fired the gun. He didn't hurt anyone physically. But the emotional fallout? That stuck with us. In the days that followed, the story made the local news. Of course it did. Former student storms reunion armed, that kind of headline. People online said all the usual things. He must have been crazy. Where were the red flags? As if hindsight ever helps. But what hit me hardest was something I couldn't shake. I couldn't remember a single time I'd said anything kind to Lucas in school. Not one. I hadn't bullied him, hadn't teased or mocked. But I also hadn't seen him. I hadn't asked where he went after lunch. I hadn't noticed when he stopped showing up. And now, 10 years later, it nearly cost all of us more than just a scare. It's strange how something like that makes you look at your past sideways. I think about all the people I dismissed as background noise, all the small moments that could have meant something if I'd just bothered to engage. Lucas wasn't a monster. He was someone left behind, someone no one really checked on. And while I know I didn't cause what happened, I also can't say I had nothing to do with it. That night didn't just make me scared, it made me ashamed. I don't know where Lucas is now, and maybe I don't want to, but I think about him more often than I admit. Sometimes when I'm around people I barely notice, I try to look twice, just in case it matters. New Year's Eve used to be my favorite night of the year. Back then, I was in my last year of high school, in a small, quiet town in Indiana, where everyone knew each other's business before lunchtime. My parents had gone out of town for the weekend, which felt like a golden ticket, a rare window of freedom right in the middle of winter break. I decided to throw a party. Nothing crazy, just a dozen friends, some music, snacks, and a couple six-packs someone managed to get from their older cousin. The plan was to hang out in the garage, which was heated and had this old couch, a fold-out table, and one of those Bluetooth speakers that lit up with the beat. Seemed like the perfect setup for one last memory before graduation took us all in different directions. By 9 o'clock, the garage was buzzing. Everyone showed up in thick coats and red noses, laughing, stomping snow off their boots. We taped up some string lights, set up beer pong, and someone passed around a speaker playlist with mostly early 2000s pop punk and some newer stuff mixed in. People drifted between the garage and the driveway, chatting, flirting, sneaking sips from flasks. It had that familiar suburban party energy, loud but still safe, almost nostalgic even as it was happening. I remember thinking, this is going to be one of those nights we talk about for years. But around 10:30, things shifted. Not all at once. It was more like the temperature dropped a few degrees even though the heater was still humming. I didn't recognize the guy at first. He was tall, wiry, standing near the fence with his hands shoved in his jacket pockets, watching everyone like he wasn't sure if he belonged there or just didn't care. One of the girls, I think her name was Erica, tugged on my sleeve and leaned in, eyes wide. "That's Lane's brother," she whispered. My stomach kind of tightened. Lane and I had broken up a few weeks earlier. It wasn't dramatic, just messy in that quiet, lingering way where the texts stop and the mutual friends stop talking. Her brother's name was Derek, I remembered now. We'd never really spoken, but from what I heard, he had a short fuse and had just gotten back from some kind of disciplinary program for fighting. I didn't invite him. No one did. I made my way toward him, trying to stay calm. "Hey man," I said, trying to keep it casual. "This is kind of a private thing." He didn't answer right away, just stared past me at the garage, eyes twitching slightly with the strobe from the speaker lights. "You know what you did?" he said, barely audible over the music. That threw me off. Before I could respond, he turned and started walking away. Not fast, not threatening, just slow and stiff, like he was holding back something. I watched him disappear down the sidewalk, and for a moment, I figured that was it. Just a weird tension flare. But the weirdest part was how no one else seemed to notice him. The party kept going, louder than ever, as if that short exchange hadn't happened. I tried to shake it off and went back inside, but something about the way he said that stuck with me, like it wasn't a warning. It was a promise. Midnight was creeping up, and someone handed me a can of silly string. We were counting down the minutes with paper hats and plastic cups, people joking about resolutions they'd break before Monday. The music was louder now, distorted even, and the air in the garage felt thicker, not from smoke or heat, but like the walls were absorbing all the noise. I checked my phone and saw a missed call from an unknown number. Then a text came through, just one word. Outside. I didn't respond. My instinct was to laugh it off, maybe someone playing around. But my fingers stayed clenched around the phone longer than they should have. Not long after, I noticed Corey and Janelle near the side window, peeking through the blinds like they'd seen something. I walked over and glanced out too. Nothing, just the yard, the fence, and a row of cars parked crooked along the street. Then I noticed one of them had its engine running. The headlights were off, but I could see the exhaust cloud in the cold air, faint and steady. It wasn't one of ours. The garage door rattled a bit, like it caught a gust of wind, but there was no breeze that night. That same tight silence settled again. It was like the whole place had paused for a second, just long enough to notice something wasn't aligning. I stepped outside, not far, just enough to look toward the curb. The car was still there. Someone sat in the driver's seat, silhouette barely visible. I waved like an idiot, thinking maybe it was someone waiting for a ride. No movement. The door to the car never opened. I turned around to head back in, and that's when the first window shattered. A sharp crack, then the scream. Short, then another, louder, higher pitched. The music didn't even stop at first. I remember the delay, that weird moment where no one knows if it's a joke or a prank or something bigger. Then the second shot rang out, and everyone scattered like ants under boiling water. The garage turned to chaos. Kids tripping over folding chairs, knocking over the snack table, scrambling for the door. Someone pulled me to the ground, and I hit my elbow hard on the cement floor. There was glass everywhere. I saw Corey dragging Janelle toward the laundry room door, her leg bleeding where the window fragments caught her. I couldn't see who got hit by the second round, but someone near the back collapsed and didn't move. The shots stopped as fast as they started. Just two, then quiet, except for the alarms from a few cars that went off from the vibrations. Somewhere, someone was still playing music on their phone like they hadn't caught up to what just happened. I crawled toward the side door, heart thumping in my ears, and peeked through the crack. The car was gone. Cops swarmed the block within minutes. I don't even remember who called. Maybe half the people there did at once. They locked down the street, went door to door, flashlights sweeping across driveways and hedges like they were looking for a wild animal. The garage looked like a war zone. Blood on the floor, shattered glass across the ping-pong table, someone's jacket torn and left behind in the rush. They took statements, asked us all the same questions in slightly different ways. I remember sitting on the porch wrapped in a blanket from my neighbor's house. My jaw clenched so hard it felt wired shut. No one said Derek's name at first, but we were all thinking it. A couple kids confirmed they'd seen him earlier. That was enough. They found him 2 blocks away, hiding behind a trash enclosure behind an elementary school. He still had the gun. Turns out it was registered to his dad. He didn't resist. Didn't say a word. They cuffed him, walked him to the cruiser, and that was it. The whole thing, from the first text to the arrest, couldn't have been more than 40 minutes. But it felt like a day had passed. Janelle got stitches. The other kid, Kyle, took one in the shoulder. He was lucky. If he'd been standing a few inches to the left, they said it could have hit something vital. The doctor told him the jacket probably slowed it down just enough. Everyone kept calling him lucky. He didn't look like he felt that way. I couldn't sleep for weeks, not because of the sound of the shots. That faded fast. It was the in-between moments that stuck, the quiet seconds before the glass broke, the way no one else noticed the running car, the way I almost went back inside like nothing happened. You start wondering how many moments like that you miss every day. The timing of everything kept replaying in my head. If I hadn't walked out when I did, if Corey hadn't seen someone at the window, if Derek had waited another 5 minutes, it's like the whole night was on the edge of something worse. That thought haunted me more than the shooting itself. We never threw another party. My parents came back early after hearing what happened. They didn't even yell. My dad just stood in the garage for a long time, staring at the holes in the wall. The town moved on faster than I expected. People talked about it for a while. Then the next thing came along. But I still think about that night every New Year's. I don't go out anymore. I keep the porch light on and check the street twice. And I don't open the garage door after dark, even if it's just wind or some harmless knock. Because that night taught me something no one ever says out loud. Sometimes you don't get a second chance to notice the wrong thing before it becomes the last thing.